Hey everybody, welcome back to the Engineered Angler. Unfortunately, we didn't catch anything with that thing on that last fishing trip we just did. And if you haven't seen that fishing trip, go ahead and check it out. I'll put a link right up here. But we did kill it with this guy. I just had a feeling about the shape and the size of this lure, and it did not disappoint. It really caught more fish than any other lure that I took with me. And I took a bunch. And of course, these are all lures that I've made. And if you're new to the channel, my name's Franco. I'm a professional engineer, a lure designer and lure maker, and an avid fisherman. And I try to make these videos to share some of the techniques and tricks that I've come up with and learned along the way, and to add a little bit of science and engineering to the art of lure making. Today, we're not actually going to make a lure, we're going to make a mold of a lure that I really have grown to like. Now I know quite a few of you have suggested that I go ahead and make a mold of this popper, but the lure I'm talking about is this little topwater mouse I made probably a couple of months ago. And the action on this mouse is absolutely perfect in my mind, and it catches fish like crazy. Anytime I want to get a good topwater action going, I throw this thing. In the afternoon, late evening, it gets absolutely hammered out here on the lake. But since I've already shaped another mouse that I like better, because this one is just a little too fat, I narrowed one down and I've refined the carvings just a little bit to make it look a little more realistic. So this is what we're going to use to make our mold. But before I can start the process of making a mold of this thing, I want to go ahead and spray it with some of this Minwax polyacrylic. And I'll use that just to seal the grain and make the surface a little smoother for the molding process. And I'll spray it about 35 psi. And I'll put about 3 coats on this thing, letting it dry about 10 minutes between coats, and then I'll dry it in the oven at about 125 degrees Fahrenheit and for about 30 to 40 minutes. And while this might look like a really simple lure, actually making a mold for it is a little bit complicated because I'm trying to do a couple of things here. First, the lure has a tail, and that tail I make separately, but it gets screwed on there with a little corkscrew piece of wire. So that has to be embedded in the casting. The other thing that has to be embedded in the casting is the lip. I don't want to have to put that on afterwards. I also want the tie-on eye and the 2 hook eyes to be in one long loop of wire inside the casting. And I want the ability to actually embed a little rattle inside the body. So that means I have to make the mold in 2 pieces so that all those embedded parts can be assembled on one side of the mold and then the other side be put on and the casting be poured. So I can't make a 1-part mold of this thing and be able to do all that. So let's go to the dry erase board and I'll show you some of the things I'm going to do. So this is kind of a rudimentary drawing of this thing. And we'll have our hook eye for the belly right here, for the tail right there. And since this is a wake bait, the bib will be in a really steep angle and our tie-on eye will be down here under the chin. We'll have our corkscrew back here, and our internal wiring harness will have to look something like this, staying low in the body and then going high and over the bib. This way I can get weight back here where it needs to be to counteract the fatter part of the lure, and I can attach the rattle chamber to the wire so it's all one piece. So imagining that this green line is the outside of our mold, we need to make this mold big enough so that we have room for some alignment keys, which will help us align the 2 halves when we're ready to pour the first casting. And we need a casting sprue, in other words, a little cut-in funnel that'll allow us to pour into this mold cavity. But everything has to be vented. So we're gonna have vents anywhere where air could be captured. And usually that's anywhere where you have humps in the casting. And so we'll put in vents like so, and probably off the nose and off the very tail. That'll help to ensure that we don't end up with a bunch of bubbles forming in those spots. We also need a space in the mold to place our little helical tail grabber. So that means we gotta have a little bit of a cavity here for that thing to sit, so that when we pour the lure, the casting gets poured around the inside part of that little twist screw. So we'll have to make a little cylinder to glue on to the back of our master. So to create that little spot where the tail corkscrew is going to go, I drilled a hole in there as if I was going to actually use it this way. But what's going to go in there is our little cylinder, which is just a little piece of stainless steel tube. And you can use anything you got lying around that's the right diameter, like a bamboo skewer or something like that, or even the inside of a pen. And since this corkscrew is only going to be sticking out maybe 3/8 of an inch, I can cut just a 1/2 inch piece of this and stick it in that hole. And I can do that with a little tube cutter. And if you've never used a tube cutter, it's simply a little cutting disc that's on a bolt that you can just tighten it. And then as you rotate it around the tube, it scores the tube little by little, cutting it off. And there you go. And we're one step closer to making the mold. Now I've made a few molds where the dive bib is actually included in the molding, so that you can take the dive bib that you want to use, stick it in the mold, and then pour your casting around it. Now the difficulty with that is that unless that mold holds that bib perfectly aligned, you might end up with your lure coming out with a slightly skewed bib either to left or right. Usually it'll be okay on the angle and as far as any kind of twist, but this kind of thing can happen real easy, and it doesn't take much to throw your lure completely off. But it occurred to me that there's a shape that really is almost immune to that problem, and that is a perfect circle. So I got a hold of these aluminum discs. They're 3/4 of an inch, which I think is going to be the perfect size for our little mouse here. I just need to do a little bit of a modification to this one, because this one needs to get past the little screw on the inside of this slot, and it'll only be used this one time to make the mold. Let's see if that did the trick. Perfect. Now it's just a matter of aligning it and gluing it in with some UV resin. And I'll set that with a little UV flashlight. And I'll put a bead of the glue along the lower edge and the upper edge, and set that with the flashlight as well. Alright, that should do it. Now I just need to make a clay bed for this so we can embed it and get that first half of the mold poured. And I'm using this Sculptex sulfur-free stuff. It seems to play pretty well with all the different silicones I've used to make these molds. And now I've got to embed this thing, so I'll outline it, and then I'll start carving out enough material so it sinks down to right down to the center line of this thing, so that the hook eyes are just barely embedded. Alright, I think that's got it. That's about halfway down the lure, and I've over excavated just a little bit at the belly and along the top, just a little bit. So I'll have to fill this in and fill in these little gaps that I've left. But that's pretty easy to do. You just take some clay and fill it back in, and then scrape back so it's nice and flush. I'm going to finish that up, and I'll get back to you when I'm done. Alright, I've created a little sprue out of the clay so that this will be our little funnel to pour with, and I put it on the highest spot of the lure, because that's what I always like doing. I want to make sure that the resin is going to be flowing from the lowest to the highest. It kind of limits the amount of bubbles. It also keeps the most buoyant part of the lure up high. And I started putting in the vents, and all I'm doing is using some small pieces of small diameter solder, and I'm placing it right where I want it to be vented. It doesn't have to be perfect, just as long as it vents to the top. So I'm putting it on all the high spots, and anywhere where there's like a sharp transition, like right here at the forehead. And of course, all your vents just need to be to the top. And I think that should do it. And now that I got the vents in, I can put in my little alignment keys. And I'm just going to use the back of this pen and make little divots anywhere I can fit them. Now I just need to build up the box so that it's going to be about 1/4 inch above my highest point on my lure. So now we can pour the first half of the mold. But first I have to figure out how much I need to mix. So I just measure the depth and then the length and the width, and I multiply to get my volume. So the depth was 1.7 centimeters, the length is 11 centimeters, and the width was 4.7, so I'll just multiply those together and it comes out to about 88 cubic centimeters or milliliters. But I need to subtract for half the volume of the lure, so that's about 13, so we'll pour 75 milliliters. All right, I've got the mold leveled and I've got my cup marked for the volume of the first half of the silicone. It's a 2-part silicone. So I'll pour part A to that mark. I'll be weighing it and then I can pour the exact same amount of weight for part B. And I can make sure that I've poured it to the right height using a flashlight. So that's right at 39 grams. I'll tare and pour 39 grams. 7, 8. All right, right on the money. I can take my time mixing this, scraping the sides, then scraping the stick off, scraping the bottom, and repeat. So I've got it nicely stirred up. I'm gonna go ahead and pour in a thin stream from one corner and let it sort of spread out all the way across. All right, no waste. Now it's just a matter of waiting for 4 or 5 hours for this thing to set. And we won't be doing anything the rest of the afternoon with this weather. All right, it's a brand new morning, pretty sunny day, and it looks like we've got a nicely set half a mold here. So next step is to take the clay out from under it. And to do that, I like to put it in the refrigerator for a little while to get this thing nice and stiff so it comes out in one piece. And I'll stick it in the freezer for a bit. And in the meantime, I'll finish my coffee. All right, I think we're ready. It's cold enough. And now it's just a matter of prying it up and trying to get it out in one piece. Once you get all the way under it, it'll usually come up pretty easily. Here we go. Now it's just a matter of cleaning up all that lingering clay in there and any that's on the body. And then we'll be ready to go ahead and get Vaseline on all the silicone and pour the second half. And now that I have it clean, the last bit of work here is to put in the second half of the sprue in clay here. And that's gonna go kind of like that once I get it trimmed back. All right, that should do it. Now it's time for some Vaseline. So the idea is you put this stuff on anything that's silicone. You don't need to put it on the lure. In fact, you probably shouldn't because you'll leave streaks and that'll end up getting cast in your final version. Definitely want to get it everywhere on the silicone. Work it in close and make sure you got it on all the alignment keys for sure. And when I'm close to being done, I like holding it up to the light so I can see where my brush strokes are. And sometimes you'll find a spot that you just missed. All right, I think that's got it. Let's go ahead and mix up our silicone and pour this last half. Now I'll be pouring the exact same amount so I can go with the weight all the way through. So I know that I used right at 39 grams of part A and 39 grams of part B. So I'll just get the scale out and we'll do the same thing. All right, that's the last little bit of it. Just the right amount, no waste at all. And I have to say, I really like this stuff. This is one of the best mold making silicones that I've used, and it's really affordable. Well, relatively affordable, because of course, this is probably one of the most expensive parts of making lures, getting a really good silicone mold. And this is like the third box of these that I bought. I'm not going to quote the price because I haven't looked at it in a couple of months, but I do have it on my Amazon store. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. If you want to buy it elsewhere, that's fine, but I get a few pennies if you buy it out of my Amazon store. Now it's just a matter of waiting for this thing to set and we'll be able to pour our first mouse. All right, it's been about 4 hours. That's another thing I like about this silicone is it sets up really quickly. Typically, 2-part silicones take about 6 to 8 hours. This takes about 4 to 6 hours. So we got a nice hard silicone set. Let's go ahead and start pulling this box apart. Ouch. All right, now the moment of truth. Make sure this thing actually comes apart. Oh yeah, feels like it's gonna come apart nice and easy. Oh yeah, perfect. Just remove the sprue. I'm gonna pull out all the vents. And if you take a close look at the vents, you can see they don't go all the way through at the very top. So I'll just take a little pair of scissors and snip them through and make sure we got connection from the lure all the way up to the outside surface. See what the inside surface looks like? That looks pretty good. So there you go. You can even see the silicone that got into the eye socket and formed it perfectly. That's got them nicely connected all the way from the lure out to the outer edge. And now I'm going to wipe it down really well with some alcohol to get the remaining Vaseline off of it and whatever little bits of clay that are stuck to it too. Seems like we're not going to get any good weather this afternoon either. Now it's time to make our wire components. We'll start off with the harness. And I'm just using the mold itself as a pattern. And that's got it. Now we just gotta come up with a way to be able to make a bunch of them. Now we need to make those coiled tail anchors. Alright, we've done all the wire forming we need to do. The one last detail we need to do is to protect the little coil from the casting resin. Because if I don't protect it, when I pour the casting resin, it'll just fill this coil up and it'll be useless. So what I'm going to do is protect it with some clay. And I'll just embed some clay in the coil, enough that when I put it in the mold, the part of the coil that's going to be outside the body of the lure is going to be protected. So now we just need to put our harness in there, and this one's got a rattle. Now we can just close the mold and we'll be ready to pour this thing. After weighing out my resin mix, I've got to mix it quickly. This resin sets up pretty quickly, about 10 minutes, and you can see it expands as it's setting. That helps fill in the voids, and you can see right there that the vents are working too. Alright, while we wait for that thing to be completely set and we can unmold it, I'm going to go ahead and cast some more of those little tails. This time, not in black, but in like a deep brown. Alright, let's see how it came out. Alright, looking good. Just need to do a little trimming. And we got ourselves a nice little tail. Just got to make a few more. Alright, time to demold the first one. A little bit of flash, but not too bad. Clearly see the carvings. And you can tell the vents have done their job. Alright, let me clean it up and we'll take a closer look. That works. Alright, it's looking pretty good, I have to say. I haven't sanded it or anything, and everything's come out. Even the little holes I made as whiskers look pretty good. A little bit of sanding would help out a little bit, but pretty happy with that. And we'll take the clay out with a stiff brush. All right, that comes out looking pretty good. Let's see what it looks like with a tail on. All right, that looks pretty awesome. I went ahead and cast 2 more of the mice, and you can see the mold is really working really well. And I'm ready to take this fishing, but first we're gonna have to wait for this to pass. Well, it didn't exactly stop raining, but sometimes you just gotta get out there and throw the lure. And it has a nice action, just like the original. And what's nice is I can pause it, give it a little tweak, and that rattle will put a nice snapping sound into the water. And I like having a nice dressed hook right in the back because it makes it look like the little back legs are waving around while it's swimming. And I know a lot of you guys are saying, put a paint job on it. But really, I think this is like the real test of how the action of a lure can entice a bite. And I suppose I could paint the bib, but really my idea with a metal bib was to have some flash. Something just a little extra to attract some attention. Oh, somebody got it. Oh, get out of the grass. Get out of the grass. Oh, got off in the grass. Son of a gun. All right, oh, we're hooked up. Alright, that didn't take long. He didn't even hit it, he actually just kind of slurped it. But he hit the front hook, so he wanted it. Alright, not big, but he was game for the lab mouse. There we go. Get out of the grass. Don't do that to me again. Oh, he's either heavy or he's got a lot of grass stuck to him. What in the world is this? Is it a fish? It's just a salad. Oh, it's another decent fish. All right, that's a good one. Yeah, baby. Both of these fish were hooked on the belly hook. All right, well, the old mouse is a little worse for wear, but he's due for a paint job and apparently a new tail. He's ready to go. All right, so what do you think? Is it going to do better with a paint job or without it? Hope you guys found this video interesting and entertaining, and hopefully you got some tips to make your own lure molds no matter what your lure might be. Don't forget to leave me a like, drop me some comments, let me know what you guys think. If you got suggestions for other builds, let me know. And don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you all next Friday.